For those of you who are new to this channel, welcome. And for those of you who I've known for quite some time now, it's so nice to see you again. My name is Beth. I happen to have celiac disease, which requires me to eat a gluten-free diet. However, a few years ago, I also went to the vegan diet or a plant-based diet. Why? Well, because I love animals and I care about my health. And for some of my health conditions, going plant-based was the best choice. So, like my prior initial deli meat videos, this particular challenge here has been, a real challenge. That is the challenge of making a roast, a ham roast that is both tasty in flavor and has a nice texture. I will tell you that the challenge for gluten-free and vegan cooking of faux meats, if you will, comes from the fact that we don't have the seitan that those who can eat gluten have the benefit of, because vital wheat gluten is so essential in making so many vegan meat recipes in the home. And then on the commercial end, some of these meats that you buy that are commercially made, well, most have vital wheat gluten, so it's a no-go for those of us following a gluten-free diet. However, for those that don't have it, you either have soy, however, you have a compound that is a binding agent, and it's called methyl cellulose. Now, I won't go into the whole detail of the controversy behind methyl cellulose. It is plant-derived, however, it's synthetically processed. So there's a lot of controversial information out there, but I'm not baking or cooking the roast with methyl cellulose. So the benefit of using methyl cellulose with these commercial-based meats, or even if you're cooking with it at home, is that it has this very strong binding ability, and not just the gelling ability like agar does, but more of a almost creating like a plastic-like effect inside the meat, such that it has a snap like meat. It holds together well. Ironically, I believe it strengthens during heat and loosens during coolness, where agar is the opposite. Agar thickens while it's after doing the cooling process, but if you heat it, it melts it or liquefies it. Anyway, that's getting into the technicalities of things. So since I'm not using methyl cellulose, well then what I need to do is find a replacement for both the ability to bind, to create somewhat of a gel-like ability so that the meat, when you cut it, doesn't crumble like a crumbly bread product. How do you do that? So that's what I've been trying to explore, and what I've been using is a combination of tapioca flour, which creates somewhat of a stretch, and also the addition of agar, which, as if you've been following the series on deli meats, it creates somewhat of a gelling texture. If you go back and watch the deli meat ham video, which I'll link below, you'll see that that's made with a large amount of agar and no cooking. And you just simply put your ingredients together, it's cashews and liquids, and then you just put a large amount of agar in it, and then you gel it by cooling it overnight. The deli meats are good for eating cold. Now, this ham roast is not good for eating cold. I would not recommend it. It's best, I'll show you, frying it in a pan, and it's also best warmed in the oven as a roast, as I'm showing you. But however, the ham deli meat, you can eat that on your sandwiches cold. I would not this one. Another way that this recipe differs from the deli meat series is that this one has pea protein in it, and also it has chickpea flour, whereas the other one has the mung beans or the split yellow lentils, and also has hemp seeds. And I heard from a lot of you saying the hemp seeds are expensive and not available, so that's why I tried to come up with something that is more readily available, the pea protein and the chickpea flour combined with the tapioca starch. So let me move on to showing you how to make this particular roast recipe, as well as how to make the brown sugar rub that you're going to put over it and bake if you want. If you do not want that, and you think you want to serve this as, let's say, slices for breakfast, and you don't want the sweetness, then just omit the rub. However, I'll show you how to make it both ways. And then also, I'll show you how to make a nice, it's not a gravy, but rather a brown sugar and butter glaze that you can put over the roast when you eat it. So with this second attempt to make the ham roast, we're not even going to talk about the first attempt. Anyway, with this second, I thought, oh, I have a clever idea. I'm going to work in layers of fat, and I'm going to have a nice, moist interior. Well, it didn't turn out that way. I'm here to taste test this ham. Let's give it a try and see what I think. So I have to confess, I'm not very happy with the texture. The flavor, I have tasted it. The flavor is that of the smoky ham flavor I wanted. It's the texture that is a bit bread-like or crumbly. That's why I'm calling this a work in progress. So I'm going to move on to my latest version of this ham roast recipe. Start by placing 1 cup of pea protein in a large bowl. Add 1/4 cup of chickpea flour to that. And then 3/4 cup of tapioca starch and 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast and 1 teaspoon each of onion powder, garlic powder, and smoked paprika. I also added 1/2 teaspoon of mustard powder, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I also added 1/4 teaspoon each of cloves and allspice. I then whisked all these dry ingredients together. Then to a saucepan on the stove, I added 1 1/4 cups of vegetable broth and 2 teaspoons of agar powder. And then I whisked that all together, and I turned on the heat to medium heat to bring it to a low simmer. After it came to this slow simmer, I allowed it to simmer for about 2 minutes, stirring occasionally to allow it to mix and thicken. And then after the 2-minute period, I turned off the heat to allow it to cool, maybe for about 2 minutes. Then to this liquid mixture, I stirred in 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. I don't know why I didn't film this, but I also added 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, 1 teaspoon of a neutral oil. I used avocado oil, and then 1 teaspoon of liquid smoke. At this point, I also added a bit of a red dye. It's a red powder to give it a slight pinkish hue. This is a natural coloring that I'm using. It looks quite pink here, but as you see as it bakes, it becomes brown. I believe this coloring is from hibiscus. I then poured the liquid mixture into the dry mixture, and I made sure to scrape out the saucepan so that I got all of the agar mixture, because I wanted as much of that agar gelling quality within the dry mixture as I could get. I started mixing with a spatula, but then I started working the dough with my hands to bring it together. I eventually formed a ball that was like Play-Doh. That's what you want, the consistency of Play-Doh. If it's too dry, you can just add water 1 tablespoon at a time until you achieve this texture. I then created a loaf, and I wrapped that loaf up with parchment paper and then foil around the parchment paper, and I sealed it tightly. I then created a steamer basket by placing a strainer over a large pot of boiling water, and I placed my sealed loaf into that steamer basket, and I covered it with a lid, and then I steamed it for a total of 90 minutes, flipping it halfway through. After it steamed for the 90 minutes, I then removed it and placed it on the counter to allow it to cool for at least 1 hour. I then dried it off with a paper towel, and I wrapped it in some plastic wrap, and I stored it overnight in the refrigerator. So the next day, I cut off a few pieces of the loaf and fried them in a pan to see how they would taste and feel, and I'll follow up with you to tell you the results. So for the remaining part of the ham roast, I was planning to bake it with a brown sugar crust on it. So I took a baking casserole dish and I brushed it with some olive oil, and I put the rest of the roast within that casserole dish. I then made a glaze by melting 1 tablespoon of vegan butter, adding 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. I also added 1 tablespoon of maple syrup. And then I stirred all these together to combine. I then coated the exterior of the loaf with this glaze. I made sure to get the top, the bottom, and the sides. For the actual crust to put on top of the glaze, I then added 3 tablespoons of brown sugar to a ramekin, and then I added 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika and 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and about 1/8 teaspoon of clove and allspice and about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I mix these all together. I then press these dry ingredients onto the exterior of the roast with the glaze on top, and the glaze acted like a glue to stick the dry mixture to the roast. I then covered the casserole dish with foil, making sure to seal the edges tightly. I then placed the roast into a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven, and I baked it for about 40 minutes. I then removed it from the oven and removed the foil, and I basted the roast with the sauce that had leaked down and around the sides. And then I placed it back into the oven, and I put the oven on broil, and I broiled it for about 2 minutes to let that sauce caramelize. I then took the roast out of the oven and I allowed it to rest for about 10 minutes before I started cutting it. So to make the brown sugar and maple butter glaze to pour over the ham, I put about 1/2 cups of vegetable broth into a saucepan, and then I added 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. I then added about 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, a pinch of cinnamon, and a pinch of black pepper, and about 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. I stirred all these ingredients together, and then I turned on the heat to about medium-high, and I just started to heat it until it started to bubble, and kept stirring it, and then it thickened. I then added a tablespoon of vegan butter, and I stirred that in. You certainly can add 2 if you like, but this adds a nice richness to the sauce and gives it a nice gloss. So back to the roast. As you can see, it slices nicely. And so I'm going to move on to showing you what it tastes like when it's without the exterior crust and then fried in a pan. And then I'll also give you a taste test served on a plate with the maple and brown sugar butter glaze. So the first thing I'm going to give a taste test to is the slices of fried ham. They were fried in the pan, as I showed you, and they're nice and warm. On the exterior, they're crispy, and let me show you what it tastes like. So it has a nice flavor. It has a slight smokiness. I really enjoy it. It is a bit crisp on the outside, but it's nice and soft on the inside. This would go really well with some mung dal eggs in the morning. I think a viewer suggested that. So yeah, you could fry this up and have it with your mung dal eggs. If you want, I'll leave a link in the description below to that particular recipe. And it would also be nice served alongside of some potatoes would be good with it. Potatoes maybe and the eggs. So now I'm going to give a second taste test to the ham roast. This is in comparison to the one that I did, well, I filmed it yesterday, but I think it's going to have a similar flavor profile. However, I'm looking for an improved texture. So let me give it a try. It has a really lovely flavor profile. It's a combination of sweet and savory. That's due to the brown sugar glaze. But as far as the ham itself, I do enjoy this one better because as far as texture is concerned, it's smoother and softer than the one prior to this one. I think you'll be happy with this one. Again, keep in mind that what we're dealing with here is an absence of the methyl cellulose. I don't even know how to pronounce it, so I kind of don't want it in my food, but that's up to you. I think you'll enjoy this recipe. If you do try it, let me know. And again, if you have any suggestions as to this conundrum of getting a snap and elasticity to the meat, as well as holding it together and creating a nice gel and soft texture when heated, leave comments below. I'd love to hear what you do. Hey, thanks so much for taking this ride with me in experimenting again with vegan and gluten-free roasts and deli meats. For those of you who are new, you'll see it's quite a ride here, but hopefully this will give you something that you can make at home that you can enjoy. Again, you have two options. Don't put this sugary glaze on it and just keep it as is, as the loaf, but again, reminder, you need to heat it. It's best probably fried up in a pan. I don't know, I didn't microwave it. But if you want to have a nice festive roast available for the upcoming holidays, this will work well, and I would put the brown sugar crust on, and I would also make the nice brown butter and maple syrup and brown sugar glaze that you can put over top. It does help increase the moisture factor and also ups the deliciousness of the meal. Again, thanks so much for watching, and check out these next videos, and I'll see you in the next video.